Hi guys, so a while back I created this painting Lightburst, which was by far the most physically complicated piece I have ever created. I had wires and lights and the whole thing. And I've been thinking about creating some similarly complicated and interesting pieces. But first, I decided that I just wanted to try and see if I could do Lightburst again, but this time I worked only with supplies that I already had sitting around in my house. So I started off with a pre-stretched 11 by 14 canvas I probably got at Walmart or Joann's sometime years ago. This is a pretty significant departure from my original 30 by 30 canvas, because not only is it less than half the size, but it's a rectangle, which means that the entire composition of the painting was going to come out a little bit differently. I had to rethink things a bit, but that's part of the challenge. So what I'm doing here is I'm painting on these bright, fun-colored bricks, which I will actually cover up with black later, but these will add a little bit of variety and interest to that background. Sadly, it won't be very noticeable, but things like this will often have a strong subconscious effect, even if people don't notice them immediately. Plus, I just find this really fun. I love the process of layering colors on top of each other to be really, really interesting. I love painting on super bright, colorful colors like this, but I don't really like having them stay through to my final piece. I like being able to layer something thin on top of it and create a whole new color. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm just putting this black and blue mixture that I've just added a ton of water to, so it's very, very thin paint that I'm painting over those bricks with, so that you can still see a little bit of the original colors, you can still see the brick shapes, but mostly it just looks dark. It gives this actually really pretty effect that you can't see very well on camera, but it's almost like when you look at a puddle of spilled gasoline or something, where it's got that a little bit of color that's kind of shimmering in the blackness. I think it's really quite beautiful and a lot of fun to do. I highly recommend playing with this if you ever get the chance. One great thing about being an artist is that what I already have lying around the house sometimes includes things that no normal person would actually already have. For instance, this pile of canvas scraps that I cut out of other paintings. So I was able to use these to make the light burst in the center of my painting. But I did think about what I would use if I didn't have this. Um, I thought about you can possibly use just other fabric, anything that's stiff enough to at least sort of kind of hold shape would work great. You could even, if you had like a thin woven cotton piece, you could probably even glue something to the back of it, just like cardstock or something, to give it a little bit of strength there. Um, or you could even just use cardstock. You could use just any kind of paper that was thick enough. Um, there's really no end of possibilities here. But I took those pieces that I cut out and I painted on them. Something that I actually didn't know when I painted the original is one of the best ways to make something look very, very bright, um, is to have pure white with like bright, warm, saturated yellow right around the edges. Um, so I did several of the pieces that way, but I also mixed in a lot of other warm, fun colors because I wanted this to feel more like fire and craziness and insanity a little bit. But I did want it to still read as bright light, and so most of them have white in the center, and I tried to have very saturated colors around the edges. Most of these I painted over again after the white was dry, so that way I wouldn't get any of that pastel-ness in the colors that I painted on the edges. And it wouldn't be an art project if something didn't go wrong. So a few of my pieces got messed up when I left them to dry. They got some other paint on them, but I was able to paint over those, and all's well that ends well because they came out looking just fine. Hello, it's actually the next day. I would have done this all in one sitting, but it was kind of late when I started and I wanted to go to bed. But that's not gonna happen today because one, it's much earlier in the day, and two, I have clothed myself with inspiration. So how could I possibly not be motivated to create art when I am wearing this beautiful work of art? It's actually a collaborative piece titled Sam's Night Out, made by some of my favorite artists in the world who are all extremely professional and definitely not just a bunch of my sisters playing a Jackbox game where we had to draw on our phones with our fingers. So yeah, that's my inspiration for the day. And I think that's gonna keep me motivated and creative, you know, wanting to create something as glorious as this drawing. One of the issues that I found sometimes when I cut up canvas is that it'll start to fray on the edges. So I'm just going to take this gloss varnish stuff that I just got at Walmart. It's nothing special. It's not even like made for nice paintings. It's just an acrylic sealer for whatever. But it is enough that it protects paint, it makes things look nicer, has a lot of the same effects as like a high quality varnish that you would use for like a really nice painting. So I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna spray it onto these pieces on the front, but I'm also gonna spray it on the back, which should add just another layer of protection for these edges so that they don't get frayed. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm also gonna, while I'm at it, spray this for all of the same reasons. I'm gonna spray it on the front and then I'm gonna spray it on the back because I'll be cutting it up soon, so I don't want that to fray either. It was about this point when my memory card is full, so I need to head upstairs to download the videos I'd already taken and grab a new memory card. What I wasn't expecting was how my life would be interrupted by a turf war between three cats. You see, two of these cats live in this house full time, but one is just visiting. Since he's been here, he's claimed the front of the house, and the other two have claimed the back of the house. The problem is, the litter boxes are all in the back of the house. Clearly, he had been coming back at least for that. I mean, there wasn't any smell. He's been here for a few days and there wasn't any issue. I didn't realize yesterday and this morning there had been a lot more like hissing in between them and stuff. Like they were getting along even worse. And I didn't even think about how that would affect the litter box situation until I walked into the front of the house a little bit ago and smelt that was an issue. I found in my sister's laundry basket that he had just decided that was his new litter box. So that was fun. Fortunately, my brief break to clean up cat poop gave me a chance to think about my next step. See, in the original painting, I drew pencil lines to mark where I was going to cut, but there were some definite issues with that system. pencil lines on canvas. They're not very erasable. When you erase it, it leaves smudges, and the lines themselves aren't reflective and shiny like graphite is. This time I'm going to try something different. Not sure how great it's going to work. I'm going to paint on lines with water. Turns out water evaporates much too quickly for this to be an effective system. So between these lines evaporating too quickly in general, and the fact that I went even slower than I would have because I couldn't find the knife that actually would have been good for cutting these, I ended up just kind of winging it and cutting whatever shapes I felt like as I went around the canvas, which meant that they didn't end up being quite as well thought out and organized as the original ones I drew. And I think they would have been better if they were a little bit nicer in that way. But I also think that they came out looking pretty good. And I'm happy with where they ended up. So when I made the first one, I started off by stretching my own canvas, and before I stretched the main piece, I put a little plus sign of canvas in the back that I used so I could sew the inside pieces onto that plus sign, so that would hold them up. I don't have anything now here though that will hold them up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try and put these floral wires in. Yeah, okay. And see if I can make a little structure that will support the inside canvas. I'm really not sure how well this is gonna work. Don't laugh at me if I fail epically. Or do. Actually, if I fail epically, please laugh, because otherwise I'll feel like it was a waste. If I fail epically and at least it's funny, then I've accomplished something, right? So my next step was to glue wires onto the back of each of these canvas strips. I actually did this in a different order in the original because I wanted to sew the strips onto the canvas before I put the wires on. But this time I'm actually going to use the wires to attach the strips, so I need to glue them on first. And I'm just using tacky glue because that's what I already had handy, and some little pieces of masking tape to hold the wires in place until the glue dried. This part can be a little bit tedious, but at the same time it's kind of fun to think about how much control I want over each piece. Many of them I put 2 wires on, like you can see here, but a lot of them I just had 1. The centerpiece, I could have just not done any wires, but I decided I wanted to be able to bend them a little. The back pieces here are a little bit harder because I had to glue back into the edges where the wooden stretcher bars were blocking me from being able to see, to get the nozzle of the glue back there, and to be able to make sure that the wire was actually down flush with the canvas. But where there were some minor errors, I was able to fix them, or they didn't cause any problems, and the whole thing worked really well. What was much harder was trying to get all these strips attached using the wires. So you may recall earlier when I put up that little wire cross in the back, I made kind of a spider web pattern at the center, and that was able to support the first several strips that I put in. I was able to kind of twist their wires around that framework. But as I added more and more strips, there was just less space for their little wires to go. And while it may just be thin floral wire, it's not like it's thread that I can just sew through any little hole, and it'll pull in nicely. So I really had to pull on things with my pliers, and I had to bend things into weird shapes and just try and make things hold together any way that I could. In the end, I had quite the little mass of wires on the top there that I was fortunately able to cover up with that centerpiece, and you never know what a mess it was, but I know. And, well, I guess now you know too. Hey, so remember that time when I said I've got my inspiration shirt on and I'm totally gonna just get this all done today? Yeah, I think that was last week, but it might have been the week before. Turns out this is a bigger project than I thought, even doing it on a small scale. But today I really am gonna finish this. All I have left, oh here, I've got everything painted, got everything sprayed, got wires on all of them, got everything attached, I've got it all here in the back. I'm happy with how that came out. It's like everything's nice and secure. Actually that should be good. I'm gonna shape these how I want, and I may need to do a little bit of gluing or sewing them to keep them in those shapes. And then I'm gonna put lights on. I'm not totally sure how that's gonna work because I don't have the exact same kind of lights that I had before. I think we're gonna be able to figure out something that will work and will be really cool. So here I am bending these canvas strips into shape. This is a huge, huge moment in the painting, really, because up until this point, I haven't really been able to see what this is going to look like, how the composition is going to work, if there's any major errors with the size and shape of those strips. And this was kind of the moment where I had to both find issues and fix them if I could. And I think it worked pretty well. I was able to hold a lot of things in place with glue once I got them bent into position, and use bobby pins to hold them together till the glue dried, which I use bobby pins all the time in my art, much more frequently, honestly, than I use them in my hair. So my final step was putting the lights in, which was a bit tricky because, as I said before, I didn't have the same kind of lights that I used the first time. And the lights that I did have not only were colored, but they're a little bit bigger and really hard to hide behind those tiny little strips of canvas. But I was able to make it work with these fun red lights, which really just weren't bright enough. And so I decided to put some lights behind them, and then I realized that the issue was not just the lights not being bright enough, but mostly just the batteries not being strong enough. So I replaced the batteries and decided to still go ahead and put the blue lights in the back because I thought it looked really interesting. And then I decided finally which direction I wanted it to be oriented, because it's an abstract design, and I changed my mind about how to orient these things all throughout the process, and then it was done. Remember guys, if you've watched this far, it's probably because you liked this video, and I would sure appreciate it if you would give me a little thumbs up and maybe let me know in the comments if there's anything that you'd like to see from me in the future. I'm still getting started with YouTube, and I would absolutely appreciate the feedback. Thanks, bye!